Hey guys, Tom here again from synthhacker.com. Welcome back to another sound design tutorial. For this one, I'm going to be showing you how I remade the chorus from Holo's track Lift Me From The Ground. Specifically, I wanted to have a go at making the lead, chords, and bass from that track. This video is going to be focused on just the lead element, and then in a couple of future videos, I'm going to be covering the chords and the bass as well. So let's listen to the demo. So hopefully you enjoyed that remake. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. I think it's quite close to the original. It's at least in like a similar area, and the sound design is definitely there. As always guys, if you've not done so already, feel free to check out my preset and sample packs over at synthhacker.com. Every purchase on there includes the presets from this tutorial as well as all my other tutorials. You'll also receive a free email update with presets from future tutorials as well. So thanks for all the support so far, and thanks in advance for checking that out. I really do appreciate it. Okay, so let's first of all just listen to the lead on its own, and then I'll break down the individual layers and then finally look at some of the group processing that's going on as well. So as you can tell, there's kind of like a synth layer there and then a more organic layer as well. Lead 1 and 2 are both just Serum, and then for lead 3 I used a sampler instrument called Keyscape. Don't worry if you don't have Keyscape. If you have any sort of other sampler instrument, you can achieve something very similar anyway. So let's first of all start with our first layer. I'll just switch off some of this group processing. The only group processing I'm going to leave on is this audio effect track. Essentially what this is doing is splitting the lead into a dry signal and a wet signal with reverb. So if we listen to just the dry signal and just the wet, you can hear that's just reverb. I use Valhalla Room at 100%. And then what this is doing is being sidechained by the dry signal, as you can see here. And what this does is it allows you to have a lead with reverb, so it gives it a sense of space. But the dry sound pushes the reverb out of the way while it's playing, and this keeps your lead still at the front of a mix, which is a really cool technique. But let's get into the actual layers themselves. So our first lead here is just Serum. This is probably the most simple out of all the layers. It's just playing the same note. The melody is this kind of like call and response between lead 1 and lead 2. And I'll just play this for you on its own. And as you can see, very basic waveforms. We've just got two saw waves. Oscillator A is a default octave, oscillator B is an octave above it. We also just have some bright white noise and a low pass 24 dB filter. As you can see in the amplitude envelope, the decay is very, very sharp. This is like a really sharp, plucky sound. And it's also modulating our filter, as you can see and hear here. And that just helps give it like the plucky nature. There's also a second envelope here which is slightly sharper than envelope 1. This is controlling the amplitude of the noise, so if I just solo that, and that just adds like a nice percussive element to the high end. It's also bypassing the filter. The only other thing really to mention with this, apart from the effects, which is just a dimension expander and a bit of low end rolled off on the EQ, is because this sound doesn't have any unison, it's very central in the stereo field. And that's one thing that I noticed in the lead in the original Holo track, was that this first lead was very central and then the response lead was very wide, which I thought was quite a cool effect. So that's pretty much it for lead 1. Let's move into our second layer here. Again, just Serum, pretty basic waveforms. I'll just play this for you solo. So this is two saw waves, oscillator A at the default octave, oscillator B an octave below it. Both have 7 voices of unison, but only the higher octave oscillator has some stereo width. So as you can see here, it's got about 60% stereo width, and the second oscillator is just completely central. This is just a really cool technique because the higher frequencies in the sound a little bit wider, and like I mentioned before, this lead is a little bit wider than the first one. We've got quite a similar amplitude envelope to lead 1. It's got quite a sharp decay, but it does have a little bit of sustain for those longer notes and a tiny little bit of release. And then next, the filter is a lower dB filter than lead 1. This is actually just a 12 dB filter, a tiny bit of resonance, and again, we're using the amplitude envelope to modulate the cutoff of the filter. It's got quite a plucky characteristic, but it sounds a little bit more open than lead 1, mainly because I think it's playing like the main melody. It needs to kind of be more present, I guess. Next, we literally just have a few effects in here, just a little bit of chorus, a little bit of the hyperdimension effect here, and again, just some lows rolled off with the EQ. I also just used an external EQ to clean it up a little bit more, rolled off some of the really high end of the sound, and again, just cleaned up some of the lows. Another thing to mention in the second lead is there's also a little bit of frequency modulation being controlled by the same envelope. I'll just show you this when it's exaggerated a little bit. Really cool effect, and I think subtly it adds a little bit of dirtiness to the sound that you wouldn't otherwise get just from super saws alone. Our final layer is just, like I mentioned, a sampled instrument. It's just this kind of like toy piano sound. Holo likes to use these types of layers in leads a lot. I've noticed it a lot in his music, and this is a cool way to make more interesting leads, essentially. You know, like I've mentioned in some of my previous videos, I think some of the most interesting sounds are blends between synthetic and realistic, and this is an easy way to achieve that. Obviously, if you don't have Keyscape, just use any old sampler instrument like Contact or Nexus or whatever it is. You know, you could even just find like a toy piano sample online and then play it in a sampler or something like that. Just anything to add more of an organic layer to the lead will work just fine. I think this was also EQ'd a little bit, probably just rolled out some of the lows. Yeah, I really made sure that this sound had no low end to it. This is really just to fill like the higher frequencies in the sound. So that's all the individual layers. If we listen to it all together again with the audio effect rep, it's sounding really, really cool, but I wanted to kind of take it a step further and make it sound a little bit closer to the original, so I did a bunch of external processing, which I'll just quickly go through. The first plugin that I used was this RC20 Retro Color plugin that you might have seen me use before, and Holo himself is actually a big fan of this plugin. He talked about it in, again, his breakdown of One Thing. It's a really cool way to add a little bit of, I guess, you know, retro color to a sound. And specifically here I use the wobble and magnetic, like wow and flutter effects. I'll just show you what I mean. It's just so cool, and because there's an element of randomness to the wear and flutter, it really helps create a more, like, I guess, warm and organic sound. The other plugin I used was just a little bit of subtle compression. It doesn't really matter what compressor you use. This one, G-Hertz Wolf compressor, is pretty cool because you can actually add even more wow and lo-fi elements to it, but I just wanted a little bit of kind of parallel subtle compression on the lead sounds. Really helps kind of like squash the individual layers together. Next, I just added a little bit of OTT. You've probably seen before, producers love to use this on leads. It really helps squeeze the most out of the sound, especially in like the high and mid end. And I didn't want to go like too crazy with this, so I think I put it about like 60%. If you don't have Ableton, you can also use Xver's version of this preset as well. The only thing that's a bit problematic here is it tends to drag the reverb tail on too long, so I added a gate afterwards. You can visually see and audibly hear it kind of roll the reverb tail off, which is a nice effect. Then just a little bit of limiting. This was just really just for the purposes of the mix, just a quick way to make sure that I wasn't getting clipping or anything. It's not really sound design related. Next, just a little bit of Lfo Tool. Again, these are all just kind of mixing elements. I just wanted to duck it out of the way at the high end of the kick a little bit. Lfo Tool is really good on a lot of elements in your mix if you want to create like a pumping effect with everything in your mix kind of moving like rhythmically together. And then the last plugin I used was this BX Refinement, and essentially this is a really cool plugin from Brainworks, and it's dedicated to removing harshness from any sound, you know, whether it's lead or drums or whatever. I'll just quickly demonstrate it, but it can be great on stuff like hi-hats and stuff like that as well. And essentially just kind of like, I guess it's like a specialized type of EQ that removes certain like problematic frequencies. I'll just show you what it does anyway. But yeah, I just found like a subtle little bit of that removed, like some of the harsh high end from all the leads like being mixed together. And that's pretty much the sound, guys. So hopefully you got some use out of this video. And if you want to stay up to date with the other two tutorials that I'm going to be putting out for the chords and bass as well, make sure to hit the subscribe and notification bell so that you get alerted as soon as I put those out. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. Go follow me on Twitter if you haven't done already. And yeah, I will see you in the next video.